Tensions between China and the Philippines are reaching a level many analysts now describe as one of the most dangerous flashpoints in Asia. What was once viewed as a long-running territorial dispute is now turning into a high-stakes geopolitical confrontation involving military alliances, strategic waterways, and fears of a much larger regional conflict. At the center of the crisis is the South China Sea, one of the world's busiest maritime trade routes and an area believed to hold massive reserves of oil and natural gas. For years, China has claimed nearly the entire region through its controversial Nine-Dash Line, despite an international tribunal ruling in 2016 that rejected Beijing's claims and sided heavily with the Philippines. China refused to recognize that ruling. Since then, tensions have only intensified. Under President Ferdinand Marcos Jr., the Philippines has taken a far more aggressive approach in defending its territorial claims. Manila has strengthened military cooperation with the United States, expanded joint exercises with allies like Japan and Australia, and begun openly documenting confrontations between Philippine and Chinese vessels in disputed waters. What used to happen quietly at sea is now broadcast to the world within hours. Videos of Chinese Coast Guard ships blocking Filipino boats, dangerous maritime maneuvers, laser incidents, and water cannon attacks have fueled anger across the Philippines and raised international concern about how close the region may be drifting toward open conflict. Chinese officials, meanwhile, accuse the Philippines of provoking tensions and allowing foreign powers to use Philippine territory as part of a larger strategy aimed at containing China's rise. The rhetoric on both sides is becoming sharper, military activity is becoming more intense, and many fear the situation is approaching a dangerous breaking point. One of the biggest reasons for concern is the growing involvement of the United States. The Philippines and the U.S. are treaty allies, meaning Washington could be drawn into a conflict if Philippine forces are attacked in the South China Sea. In recent years, military cooperation between the two countries has expanded dramatically. Large-scale exercises involving thousands of troops now take place regularly near contested waters and areas close to Taiwan. Advanced missile systems, naval operations, and live-fire drills have become part of these exercises. China sees those developments as a direct threat. Beijing has repeatedly warned that the increased American military presence in the Philippines is destabilizing the region. Chinese officials argue that outside powers are turning the South China Sea into a battlefield for strategic competition. But Philippine leaders insist they have little choice. For many in Manila, China's growing assertiveness has made stronger alliances necessary for national security. Filipino fishermen operating near disputed shoals have repeatedly reported harassment, intimidation, and restricted access to fishing grounds they have used for generations. Philippine officials say Chinese Coast Guard vessels often outnumber and overpower smaller Filipino boats, creating fear among coastal communities that depend on the sea for survival. The Philippines has increasingly framed the issue not just as a territorial dispute, but as a question of sovereignty, food security, and national dignity. And that message is resonating strongly with the public. Nationalist sentiment has surged in the Philippines as confrontations with China become more frequent and more visible. Each incident at sea fuels calls for tougher action against Beijing and stronger cooperation with allied countries. At the same time, China is also facing growing domestic pressure to maintain a hardline position. President Xi Jinping has made territorial control and national strength central themes of his leadership. Backing down in the South China Sea could be viewed intersect. Nally is weakness, something Beijing appears unwilling to risk. That is why many analysts believe the real danger may not come from a planned war, but from an accident. The South China Sea has become crowded with Coast Guard ships, fishing vessels, military aircraft, naval patrols, and surveillance operations from multiple countries operating within close distances of each other. In such an environment, even a small mistake could escalate rapidly: a collision, a warning shot, an injury, a misunderstanding. Any one of those incidents could trigger a chain reaction difficult to contain. And the situation becomes even more dangerous when Taiwan enters the equation. The Philippines sits in a strategically critical location near Taiwan and major regional shipping lanes. If a future conflict breaks out over Taiwan, military planners believe Philippine territory could become extremely important for logistics, surveillance, and defense operations. That possibility has already shaped regional Military strategy: recent joint drills between the Philippines, the United States, and Japan have included exercises near northern Philippine islands facing Taiwan. Japanese forces have also become more active in security cooperation with Manila, reflecting growing concern over China's expanding military influence. For Beijing, this increasingly looks like encirclement. Chinese officials frequently accuse Washington and its allies of building an anti-China coalition across the Indo-Pacific region. State-linked media in China has criticized the Philippines for allowing expanded military access to American forces. Meanwhile, Philippine officials argue they are simply protecting national territory and defending international law. The dispute is no longer just about rocks, reefs, or fishing rights. It is now tied directly to the global balance of power, and economic interests make the situation even more complicated. The South China Sea is one of the most important trade corridors in the world. Trillions of dollars in global commerce pass through these waters every year. Any major conflict in the region could disrupt international shipping, damage global markets, and trigger serious economic consequences far beyond Asia. Energy competition also plays a major role. Several disputed areas are believed to contain significant reserves of oil and natural gas. For countries dealing with energy security concerns, control over these resources carries enormous strategic value. Negotiations between China and the Philippines over joint energy exploration have repeatedly stalled because of worsening political tensions and unresolved sovereignty disputes. Trust between the two sides continues to erode. That growing distrust has fueled increasingly dramatic accusations online and in political commentary. Claims have circulated suggesting China may be targeting Philippine infrastructure or attempting to pressure Manila through economic and environmental means. However, there is Karen. No verified evidence supporting allegations that China is poisoning water supplies in the Philippines. Such claims remain unproven and speculative. Still, the fact that many people are willing to believe such accusations shows how deeply suspicion has grown between the two countries. Diplomatic relations remain strained, though not entirely broken. China and the Philippines continue participating in regional talks through ASEAN, where discussions about creating a South China Sea Code of Conduct have dragged on for years. The goal is to establish rules that reduce the risk of military escalation and prevent dangerous encounters at sea. But progress has been slow. Every new confrontation makes compromise more difficult, and both governments face political pressure at home not to appear weak. President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. has repeatedly emphasized the need to defend Philippine sovereignty and protect Filipino rights in contested waters. His administration has also adopted what officials call a transparency strategy, releasing videos and information about maritime incidents to rally international support. That approach has changed the dynamics of the conflict. Instead of quiet diplomatic disputes, confrontations are now instantly transformed into global headlines. Public opinion reacts immediately. National emotions rise quickly, and leaders face growing pressure to respond forcefully. China, meanwhile, continues expanding patrols and infrastructure in disputed areas while insisting its territorial claims are historically justified. Neither side appears ready to back down. Despite the alarming tensions, both Beijing and Manila publicly insist they do not want war. Chinese officials continue calling for dialogue and bilateral negotiations, while Philippine leaders say they seek peace and stability in the region. But military buildups often create risks even when nobody intends to start a conflict. History has shown that wars can begin through miscalculations, accidents, or spiraling retaliation rather than deliberate planning. That is exactly what worries many defense analysts today. The South China Sea has become one of the most heavily militarized maritime regions in the world. Naval ships shadow each other. Fighter aircraft conduct patrols overhead. Surveillance systems monitor movement constantly. Alliances are strengthening, strategic competition is accelerating, and the margin for error keeps shrinking. For ordinary people living near these contested waters, the consequences are already real. Fishing communities face uncertainty about access to traditional fishing grounds. Coastal residents worry about the possibility of military escalation. Businesses fear instability could damage trade and tourism. Across Southeast Asia, many governments are watching nervously, hoping tensions can be contained before the region is pulled into something much larger. Because if a serious confrontation ever erupts between China and the Philippines, it may not remain limited to those two countries for long. The involvement of the United States alone could transform a regional clash into a much broader international crisis. That reality is why every encounter in the South China Sea now attracts global attention. Every ship movement matters. Every military exercise sends a message. Every confrontation raises the stakes. And while diplomacy continues behind closed doors, events on the water are moving faster than political negotiations. The world is now watching closely to see whether regional leaders can prevent the situation from spiraling further out of control. Because the fear is no longer just about a territorial dispute. The fear is that one mistake in the South China Sea could ignite a crisis far bigger than anyone intended.